How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the shop. It's great to have you guys here. Now, in the last shop episode, we were working on this 9-foot dining room table. We cut the joinery on the base, and then we also cut these really cool scalloped profiles as well. Now, in this video, we're going to assemble the base and then lay up this really nice veneered top for the table. It's an MDF core with veneers on both sides. I'm also really excited to announce that this video is sponsored by Norboard, who's doing a campaign called Become a Framer. This is something that hits close to me because it has to do with skilled trades, and part of their sponsorship, they're offering an Estwing hammer giveaway. So stay tuned. I'm going to tell you more about that here in a little bit. Let's get started on the table. Okay, so the first thing I needed to do before I assembled this table base was to work on the legs. There's a transition where that 45 hits the straight, and there's a little bit of a radius there from the router bit. I needed to chisel that so there's a nice, clean, crisp transition. That way the apron fit into the leg exactly how I needed it. And then I used my disc sander here to fine-tune the apron, the angle on the apron. So I would kind of try to match them up, see where I needed to make adjustment, and then take it over here to the sander. I've got a little miter fence there that helps me position it, and I can adjust it. And it's a really great way to make a minor change to that angle on the bottom of that apron. So before I glue up the actual table, I go ahead and glue in these splines. These are made out of oak, and I just glue them into the aprons, clamp them down, and let that glue set up, and that way I'm not fighting that part of the glue up when I do the whole table. So I'm going to go ahead here and glue in the shorter apron. So I'm going to do the short side of the table and then let that glue set and do the long side of the table. Pretty simple and straightforward. Just load it up with glue and get it all together. I put a clamp across the width of it to pull it tight, and then I had to put a clamp on the foot to suck down that miter so it's nice and flush. And one of the things I purposefully did here was leave that spline proud, so when you do clamp the foot side, it actually it's pulling down on the spline and pulling it together, as opposed to not being able to pull it together if the spline was below the surface. So I always check when I glue up those short sides that there's no racking in the legs, so that when I come back to glue the long ones, they're not out of whack and you're going to have gaps. You want them to be perfectly on a flat plane. Once the glue dries, take it out of the clamps, and I pull out my Stanley 4.5 just to level those joints, smooth them out. It's really quite satisfying to see how nicely they came together, and once you all clean it up, how cool it looks where that glue joint line cuts at that angle. And then on the inside where we have the curve, I use my card scraper to just kind of feather that together and make that transition nice and smooth. Okay, so before we glue up the table base, I want to tell you about Norboard's campaign, Become a Framer. Now, there is a huge shortage right now in carpenters for home building in America. I think the average age is 47 years old. So there's a great deal of opportunity if you're interested in carpentry. If you're young and you're looking for something to do and you want to work with your hands, you want to do meaningful work, which is something that I can attest is very satisfying. You know, building furniture is something I love doing. Building houses and working with your hands and staying out of an office. These are all things that I know a lot of you guys who watch my channel appreciate. So this Become a Framer campaign is a great resource for you. For one, to find opportunities for apprenticeships, even get free apprenticeships, learn the trade. There's actually rising pay right now for framers because there's a shortage in the industry, so it's a great time to jump on this and get in and learn the trade. And what's great about skilled trades is if you're really passionate about it, you really want to learn it, you can work your way up to where you become your own boss. Exactly what I did. You know, I paid my dues, I did apprenticeships, I worked under people, and now I have my own shop. And this is a great starting point for you younger guys, a great resource where you could start a career path that leads you to owning your own business and being very successful. I have a lot of friends in my hometown that own skilled trade businesses that do really well. So you don't have to go to college, get a 4-year degree, and possibly go into debt for jobs that are competitive and also not there. The market's not great for them when there's this huge opportunity for carpenters right now. So I would highly recommend that you head over to becomeaframer.com/Andy Rawls, learn more about their campaign, start your track to becoming a carpenter if that's something you're interested in, and also you can enter to win a Home Depot gift card and this Estwing hammer, a beautiful hammer. So finally, I want to say thanks to Norboard for setting up such an awesome campaign. I'm very happy to get behind it and thankful that they sponsored the video, and I highly recommend that if you're interested in this, you go check it out and see what it has to offer. Now this is actually a test fit here. I had to test fit the whole table together to make sure nothing had gotten off. I don't want any surprises, so oftentimes I'll skip test fits, but here I definitely decided this was a good idea. And it took, I think my dad and I worked for an hour or so on just tweaking those joints, which you don't see in the video. We jump right into the glue up here, just loading everything up with glue and putting it all together. Start with it upside down on the floor, get it all assembled, and then we flip it over and clamp it up nice and tight. This would be real difficult to do on my own, so I'm thankful to have my dad around to help me move this thing around. Alright, so we got the table all glued up. It's actually sitting right there. You get a better idea of what it looks like with the splines in there. The glue went fairly well. We did a test run on it, and the joints look good. There's quite a bit of cleanup to do. I got a little off there. I don't know if you can see, that's about a 30-second off. I guess the mortiser moved a little bit on me. But other than that, I can work that down with the hand planes. I mean, it's just going to take a little work. I've been working on the top, so we're veneering the top up, and I learned a little lesson here, and I should have known better. I really should have. So I've got to make a core. I don't know if you can see back in here. This is my first try, these two pieces, and the core is, this is 3/4 MDF glued to 1/4 inch MDF. I put that in the bag and glued it up, and it was the glue line, since the glue line's off center, because you got a 1/4 inch to a 3/4, it actually caused it to bow pretty significantly. So I talked to a buddy of mine, actually Philip Morley. He's like, yeah, that's a big no-no. You got to use the same thickness core when you glue up. So I've switched over now to 2 pieces of 1/2 inch to get an inch thick core. Just took this one out of the bag. It's flat as can be, so we're cooking now. It's looking good. Then when they come out, I'll cut them down. I'll put maple banding around the outside, and then we'll make the veneer, which is what we're about to do. Also, you've probably seen this video by now, the shovel video. This thing has been a monumental amount of work. That's all the shavings I've made so far on it. I got into trouble here and really made some poor judgment on it. I was coping this out, which really is not the right tool to use to cut that out. The coping saw is too fine of a blade. So I just took the router and started routing it out. And you're talking about 1.5 inches. You can tell. I grabbed the bit, came around, and hit it and blew out a piece. Okay, so I just wanted to jump in real quick and kind of clarify. I don't think I did a great job explaining what happened there. It's not like I just plunged down and took all that waste out in one pass. I did it in small increments. It took about 1/4 inch each pass until I made that hole. And then I decided that I didn't like the size of the handle, so I was going to plunge the full depth and just do a very light pass and clean off a little bit of the handle. And that's where my mistake was. It was unsupported cut. There's no fence or guide to run the router on. And so since I'm freehanding it, the bit caught and it snapped up. And I was really lucky. I was able to hold onto the router. If I had dropped it, could have landed on my leg, foot, or even on my hand. So really, really bad idea. I wanted to show you guys that. Don't do that. I also would love for you guys to go over and check out that video. It was a really cool build, a lot of fun. Hopefully that teaches you something. We all make mistakes. This was a bad one on my part. Let's jump back into the build and work on this veneer. So I've face jointed all my, this is 8/4, I've face jointed and edge jointed, so I have 2 square surfaces to work with. Obviously I need that, so you really have to fine tune your bandsaw and get it all set up right. The blade needs to be square to the table, and the fence needs to be square to the table, and then your material needs to be squared up. I realize here that I need some dust protection because there's a lot of dust flying up on this thing. I do have a dust collector hooked up to it, but it doesn't really work. It needs a lot of modification. Anyway, so I'm basically going to split out. I'm cutting a little under, or right at or a little under 1/4 inch, and I think I'm cutting out like 22 or 24 of these veneers. So on a few occasions I have to, in the middle of the sawing, have to head over to the joiner and reface joint because things got a little wiggly. But for the most part, right off the saw, you should have a really nice finished surface with just a little bit of mill marks. I use a really good Woodmaster's carbide tipped resaw blade. It works really well and leaves a really good finish on the veneer. Okay, so once I resaw everything, I'll just run these veneers through my white belt with a 60 grit abrasive, clean up both sides. I end up probably at around 3/16 when they're all said and done. And then from there, once they're all sanded up and cleaned up, I can rip them all of the same size, which I don't think you see in a video. And then I use a shooting board that I built that you see here with a low angle jack plane, because it's the only plane that's perfectly square from the face to the side, or from the sole to the side. And I just shoot it. I run along the length and get a really, this is the only way to fine tune this joint and get it nice and straight. My joiner won't do it. I don't have a great joiner. And so I go through and do every single joint like this and just work on them and fine tune them. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these panels up at 3/16 of an inch thick, and there's a very minimal clamp pressure you can put on these because you've got such thin boards. So you absolutely have to have your joints tuned up to the point where you really don't have to put any pressure. Just get them slightly pinched together and everything closes up. Very light amount of pressure, and put a little weight on it if you need it. I got some weights I can put on it, and that's the best way to do it. So once those dry, I can now run the full width panels through the sander, and I'll end up at about 1/8 of an inch thick once I do that. And then they are ready, they are nice, trued up and flat, and ready to go on to the core, the MDF core that we've already made and banded. Why did I do this? Sometimes I really don't know what I'm thinking. It's actually ashamed to admit that I was holding my phone with one hand trying to film an Instagram story and holding the veneer with the other as it came out of the sander, and I dropped it and it broke. It's okay, it's totally fixable. I just feel really stupid. Lesson learned: put your phone away, quit worrying about social media. So the crack was a fairly easy fix. So I took, I've got this veneer tape that you wet, and then you kind of stitch it over the crack. You actually do this on seams too, and then just tape it all off. And then when that tape dries and loses its moisture, it shrinks and kind of pulls everything together. And then you just drop it into the bag, and the tape will sand off. It's almost like paper, so you don't have to peel it off when you're done. So I've got my dad again helping me out. We're just spreading. I'm using Unibond 1 glue. It's a really good veneer glue, really hard glue line, and I spread it on both the veneer and the core. And then I like to use a little pin nailer just on the corner, just to hold it in place, because it'll slide around on you, and you do not want it to get off. And once you get the other side done, I just taped it all off with blue tape, and then I usually take like some 150, 120 grit sandpaper and around the edges, and definitely hit the corners, so that when you put it in the bag and the bag sucks down, those sharp edges and corners don't poke a hole in your bag and cause leaks. So we had 2 panels to do. I let each one dry overnight in the bag, make sure it's nice and set up, make sure that glue's set up really well. Then I've got the domino out here made by Festool. I'm just putting these little holes in, and I'm going to put floating tenons in those and glue these 2 pieces together to get my full 9 foot of length. Again, the reason I did this was I just didn't want to manage. Well, actually, I didn't have a bag long enough to veneer, and veneering that long of a piece, it just adds a lot of challenges to the project. And since it's getting painted and you're never going to see that joint, I just saw it to be a lot easier to make the 2 panels and then glue them together. Surprisingly, this joint is really strong. A lot of people might think that it would break really easily, but the table is going to be well supported, and it will not break, I promise. Check that out. It is a brand new Oliver lathe. This is an Oliver Classic 2018. This is a new model, not an old machine. It's all cast iron. There's no plastic in this. I'm super pumped to have it. A big thanks to Oliver. I did pay a pretty good chunk for this, but they did offer somewhat of a discount, so I do appreciate that. I'm very excited to get to work on this machine. A couple things that I plan on doing. For one, is obviously just turning between centers. I always have little things I want to turn. Gun stocks. I'm going to need that to bore holes for the stock bolts and stuff like that. And I'm really excited to start getting into bowl turning. I have big plans to start doing some bowl turning, and I have a lot of, I think, cool ideas for that. So this will turn. I think we can fit an 18-inch bowl here on this side, and it has an outboard side, and I have an attachment coming. It's not here yet, that I can actually attach a extension here and a tool rest and get a bowl that will come from there to there, which is ginormous. And I've never turned a bowl, so I don't really know what I'm doing. I'll start obviously turning small bowls just to get the hang of it. I'm gonna take you guys kind of on that journey. But yeah, I'm pumped to have this. A big thanks to Oliver. This is a really cool lathe. We've got a digital readout, so I can slow her down right here. Pretty sweet. Super smooth machine. It's got a belt drive in there. Nice solid steel shaft. It really is a great piece of equipment. Excited to have it. I don't think you see many of these lathes at all. Most people have Powermatics or one-ways. I'm the only one with a freaking awesome Oliver lathe. So, excited to start using that. Hope you guys look forward to seeing some bowls getting turned. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to take it for this video. You'll get to see it finished, I promise. It'll be in an upcoming video. It looks really good. I love the way the top came out. This is all getting painted, so you're not going to see any of the glue lines or anything like that. It's all going white. And it's going to have a metal frame that's being fabricated right now that's going to go up inside to give it some stiffness and rigidity to keep it from sagging. That's got to happen. You'll see that as well. I've done so much sanding, unfortunately, on this thing that I know the big HEPA filter on my Oneida dust collector is probably caked and clogged with sawdust. So I get to do the wonderful task of cleaning that out. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next time.